When Keanu Reeves walks onto the stage of Jimmy Kimmel's show, the audience expects the usual mix of charm, thoughtful responses, and a quiet acknowledgement of his latest project. But Jimmy has something else in mind. Behind the smile and the scripted lines, a subtle trap is set. He wants to provoke to unsettle Keanu's calm demeanor and to reveal something the world has never seen before. Slowly, the tone shifts, the laughter fades, and tension fills the air. And then something unexpected happens. A response that no one saw coming. A silence that speaks volumes. Within moments, the most famous talk show on television turns into the scene of a live confrontation that leaves everyone speechless. Keanu Reeves walked off Jimmy Kimmel's show after a heated clash, and what he revealed that night is something no one will forget. But before we continue, tell us, what's the one thing you love most about Keanu Reeves? Let us know in the comments. The lights swept across the studio like searchlights scanning the night. Music pulsed through the speakers, lifting the energy of a crowd already on the edge of euphoria. Applause thundered, echoing off the walls adorned with posters and neon signs. The set hummed with anticipation. Tonight's guest had arrived. Keanu Reeves stepped onto the stage with a quiet gravity only he could carry. Dressed in dark jeans, a simple black shirt, and a blazer that barely drew attention to itself, he moved with the ease of someone who had long stopped performing for anyone's approval. His eyes scanned the room unhurriedly, his smile faint, almost private. He waved once, then took his seat, backstage. Maggie stood behind the curtain, one hand resting on her hip, the other holding her phone inside her coat pocket. Her expression didn't match the giddy excitement in the air. She wasn't smiling, she was watching. Two producers leaned in close to a monitor. "Tonight, we get a reaction," one of them said. The other smirked. "He's too perfect, too calm. We crack him tonight." Maggie heard every word but didn't flinch. She pressed record on her phone and slid it deeper into her coat. On stage, Jimmy opened with his usual charm. "We've got a special one tonight, folks," he said, addressing the crowd. "This guy's not just a movie star. He's a philosopher with a black belt, the kind of guy who can quote Rumi while reloading a shotgun." The audience erupted in laughter. Keanu gave a modest nod, smiling as if the praise wasn't meant for him. Jimmy leaned in with a grin. "So, Keanu, you're here with a new project. Something quiet this time, right? No explosions?" Jimmy asked. Keanu nodded once. "It's a documentary," he said, "called Between Silences. It's about faith, about how sometimes we find meaning not in noise but in the spaces between sounds." "Intense," Jimmy remarked, his eyebrows raised. "What's intense is pretending everything's fine when it isn't," Keanu replied. "Silence isn't retreat. Sometimes it's how we survive." Jimmy chuckled nervously. "Okay, wow, we're getting deep early tonight." Backstage, Maggie shifted uncomfortably. Her eyes were locked on Jimmy's cue cards, and her expression darkened when she saw a few bolded keywords. Mimi's religion cross necklace. Monk. Keanu sat straighter, or perhaps just stiffer. He was smiling, but his body had gone still like an animal sensing a trap. "You spent 4 years on this documentary," Jimmy said, flipping to the next card. "Alone, sometimes not speaking to anyone for days. Pretty extreme." Keanu answered simply. "What's more extreme is never stopping to listen." Jimmy laughed automatically, almost reflexively. "You ever think maybe you're just too serious, man?" Keanu didn't flinch. "Seriousness isn't the absence of joy. It's the presence of purpose." A few soft claps came from the audience. Jimmy flashed a grin, but something behind it cracked slightly. "I mean, look at you," he said, motioning to Keanu's posture. "You're like this modern monk, but with cooler boots. Are you always like this, or is this just for show?" "I'm not interested in shows," Keanu said. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was heavy. Jimmy quickly grabbed another card, eager to change the topic. "Well, tonight we're gonna keep it light. People want to laugh, not go to therapy, right, folks?" He gestured to the crowd, which laughed on cue. Keanu didn't respond. His eyes flicked down for a brief second to the cards in Jimmy's hand, and something shifted. His legs crossed slowly. He leaned back in his chair, but not in comfort, in preparation. His smile faded, not with anger, but with recognition. Backstage, Maggie's whisper barely escaped her lips. "They're pushing him, and he knows it." The audience kept laughing, unaware that the silence sitting beside Jimmy wasn't passive. It was waiting. The screen behind them flickered to life with a bright pop. Jimmy turned toward the audience, eyes gleaming. "So we pulled some things from the internet," he said, almost bouncing in his seat. "You guys know the meme, economy loves this man. Let's take a look at what they've done with Keanu over the years." The audience cheered. Keanu's gaze remained fixed on the screen. The first image appeared, a grainy photo of him outside a hospital alone, wearing a mask and a hoodie. Someone had added a cartoon halo over his head, the words St. John Wick in bubble letters, and distorted his face with a ridiculous filter. Laughter erupted. Jimmy pointed at the screen, grinning. "I mean, come on. Even when he's buying painkillers, he still looks like he's saving the world." The audience roared with laughter. Keanu's mouth didn't move. His hands rested quietly in his lap, and the edges of his smile had faded. Another image appeared, a shot from a red carpet event zooming in on the silver cross around his neck. Jimmy leaned forward, his voice playful. "Now, here's a hero of action who also goes to confession." The laughter grew louder this time, a few people whistling, and someone shouted, "Preach, Keanu!" He didn't flinch, only blinked slowly. Backstage. Maggie stood frozen, her jaw clenched. She had seen that cross before. She was the one who had placed it in his hand after the funeral. She knew exactly what it meant. Jimmy, still riding the wave of laughter, pressed on. "So be honest, Keanu. Are you a monk now or just a really good actor pretending not to be pissed off?" The room fell silent. Even Jimmy seemed to realize he had crossed a line. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't change his expression. "The pain I've lived through," he said softly, "taught me that silence also speaks." The laughter stopped abruptly. People shifted in their seats. A few clapped, tentative, respectful. The rest looked confused. Jimmy cleared his throat, trying to regain control. He attempted a smile, but it came out crooked. Okay, I deserve that," he said. "I mean, I'm just trying to keep things fun here. You're kind of like walking poetry. I don't know what to do with that." Keanu gave a small nod. "Maybe just listen," he said. Jimmy chuckled nervously, glancing down at his cue cards. He wasn't laughing anymore, so he continued. "I also found a tweet that said, and I quote, 'Keanu Reeves is what would happen if empathy had a six-pack.' You think that's fair?" "I don't think empathy needs muscles," Keanu said. "It needs presence." Jimmy set the card down. "Man, I swear you've always been like this." Keanu looked directly at him. "You mean not laughing when the pain isn't mine?" The audience fell into a strange silence, not awkward but tight and charged. A few people in the front row stopped smiling. Jimmy exhaled, trying to steer the conversation in another direction, raising his arms like a conductor redirecting a symphony. "Well, we're going to shake things up. Let's play a little game, shall we?" Jimmy announced. The screen behind them blinked, and once again a title appeared in big bubbly letters. "True or False Keanu Edition." Jimmy turned to the camera. "Here's how it works," he said. "We'll show a story and Keanu tells us if it's real or just internet nonsense." He looked at Keanu, grinning. "Sound good." Keanu didn't move. Then he spoke slowly. "This isn't why I came here." Jimmy blinked, taken aback. "Sorry, what?" Keanu shifted slightly in his chair, his tone unchanged. "This interview is a spectacle. I'm not here to play a part." A few audience members clapped quietly, while others glanced around, unsure of how to react. Jimmy forced a smile. "Man, you really take this stuff seriously." Keanu leaned forward just slightly, his voice calm and his eyes steady. "Maybe you need to feel something real." The words landed like weight dropped into a still pool. Jimmy blinked twice, caught off guard. The grin had vanished from his face. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Backstage, the camera assistant glanced nervously at the control booth. Inside, the director whispered to someone, her voice tight. "He's flipping it," she said. "Keanu's flipping the room." On stage, Jimmy sat frozen, one hand still holding the card, the other resting on his knee. Around them, the laughter had completely vanished. In its place was something else, something no one had planned. For a few seconds, Jimmy said nothing. He just stared at Keanu, his eyes darting as if searching for a punchline that had slipped away. But there was no laughter to save him this time. Only the hum of studio lights and the stillness of an audience suddenly unsure of what show they were watching. Then Keanu spoke. "My sister died of leukemia," he said quietly. "I was 23. I spent 2 years sleeping on a hospital floor." The room was still. My daughter was stillborn. Her mother and I buried her on a rainy afternoon in the Hollywood Hills. We named her Ava. A breath caught in the audience. My best friend crashed into a tree going 90 miles per hour. The car exploded. I was supposed to be with him that night. Jimmy shifted in his seat, his eyes wide. He hadn't asked for any of this. He had no response ready. "I chose silence," Keanu continued. "Not because I had nothing to say, but because everything I could say felt small." Backstage. Maggie covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes locked on Keanu, glistening with emotion. "People ask me why I'm quiet," Keanu said. "Why I don't fight back. It's because I've already fought through the worst kind of noise." Jimmy cleared his throat. "Look, man, I didn't mean to. I was just trying to lighten the mood a little." Keanu's eyes never left his. "And sometimes humor is a shield, I get that. But when you turn someone's grief into a guessing game, what are you really doing?" Jimmy blinked slowly, then forced a too wide smile. "Well, let's get back to the fun, huh?" he said, gesturing at the screen again. "Let's not get too dark." A new slide appeared. Which of these Keanu stories is true? Photos and headlines flashed in bright colors. Keanu buys ice cream for the entire crew. Keanu secretly funds cancer hospitals. Keanu eats lunch alone in the park. Jimmy clapped his hands together. "Okay, pick the true story, Keanu." Keanu didn't even look at the screen. "This isn't a game," he said, "and this isn't the place." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sharp, like something had just cracked in the air. A low murmur rippled through the audience. Some people were still smiling, unsure of what to make of it, while others began shifting in their seats, visibly uncomfortable. Now Jimmy tried again, this time with an edge in his voice. "You know you take everything so damn seriously. Maybe that's your problem. Maybe you need to lighten up." Keanu didn't blink. He leaned in, his voice steady. "And maybe you need to feel something real." Jimmy's expression flickered, and for the first time all night the mask slipped just a little. Behind the scenes, the director leaned forward, whispering, "He's losing control." Keanu was turning the whole thing on him. On stage, Jimmy sat frozen, his hands limp in his lap. His smile had completely faded now, and the energy in the room had shifted, never to return. The pause stretched too long, and Jimmy's jaw clenched as he adjusted his position in the chair. His fingers tapped twice on the armrest before he laughed, short, forced, and sharp. "You act like you're better than everyone," he said louder than before. "Like whispering and looking at the floor makes you holy. That's not humility, Keanu. That's arrogance dressed up as depth." A stunned hush fell over the room. Keanu didn't flinch. "It's not arrogant to speak softly," he replied. "But it is arrogant to twist pain into entertainment for the sake of a clip that'll go viral." Jimmy leaned forward, pointing now, his voice rising. "Fuck you, Keanu!" The words landed with the weight of a brick through glass. Gasps rippled through the audience. Someone in the back muttered, "Whoa!" A few phones lifted in the air, recording without hesitation. The room froze. Lights, cameras, sound. Everything captured in a moment that had just crossed a line. No one expected. Keanu didn't react. His eyes stayed fixed on Jimmy, unblinking. Behind the curtain, Maggie's breath caught. She stepped forward halfway between backstage and the edge of the spotlight. She didn't move beyond it, but her body was tense, waiting for the moment she'd have to step in. Jimmy blinked rapidly, like he'd just realized what he'd said. The anger drained from his face, replaced by something closer to fear. But Keanu didn't rise. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't give the chaos the moment had begged for. Instead, he leaned in slowly, calm as ever. His voice like stone wrapped in velvet. "You said in an interview once," he began, "that your father left when you were young, that you were afraid people would see you as weak." Jimmy's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Keanu's voice stayed quiet. And now you stand here mocking someone for their grief, for their silence, for their faith. But I see what this is. You know exactly what it's like to be ridiculed. The audience was completely silent now. Not a cough, not a rustle, just breath and attention. Keanu held Jimmy's gaze. And tonight, you became the man who once made you feel small. Jimmy blinked once slowly. His hands dropped to his lap. In the crowd, someone started clapping, then another person joined in. It wasn't loud, but it was steady, real like the beginning of a wave. No one had asked for, but everyone could feel coming backstage. Maggie's eyes welled with tears. She didn't wipe them away. She just kept watching her lips press together. On stage, Jimmy tried to smile, but his mouth wouldn't quite cooperate. He reached for his coffee mug, but his fingers knocked it over instead. The canister tipped, spilling water across the desk and onto the floor, sliding toward the edge of the stage. The moment lingered, not as a dramatic finale, but as something quieter, something irreversible. He tried to steady himself to regain control, but the show was no longer his to command. The mug clattered as it rolled off the edge of the table, spilling the last of its contents onto the floor. Jimmy didn't move to catch it. He stared down, jaw clenched, shoulders squared, but his eyes had lost their focus. Across from him, Keanu sat with a calm that no longer seemed passive. It seemed earned. I read that interview you gave, Keanu said quietly, just loud enough for Jimmy to hear, but clear enough for the audience to feel. The one where you said being called weak was worse than being called cruel. Jimmy didn't respond. His breathing had quickened. Keanu leaned forward again, his voice steady. You said that when your dad left, the silence in your house was worse than the shouting. That you learned to be loud, just so no one would hear how scared you were. Something shifted in Jimmy's face, just slightly, like a window cracking before it shatters. You know what it feels like to be laughed at, Keanu said. To be doubted, to be questioned for how you feel, and yet here you are, making someone else the punchline. The audience sat frozen in the silence that followed, but it wasn't uncertain anymore. It was a silence of reckoning. You turned into the thing that used to hurt you, Keanu said. There was no anger in his voice, only truth, plain and unflinching. For a moment, Jimmy didn't speak. His throat tightened visibly. Then he gave a short, dry laugh, defensive. You think you know me? He asked. But the strength behind the question was gone. Keanu didn't move. No, I just know what pain does to people. Someone in the audience clapped once. A second person joined in, then more like a ripple moving through still water. The applause spread slowly, not out of spectacle but out of recognition. Cameras caught the moment as it grew. Jimmy looked out at the crowd, stunned. He wasn't used to being the one under the lights without control. Not like this. Not when it was real. Backstage. Maggie watched tears slipping down her cheek. She didn't wipe them away. She just breathed in slowly, her hand pressed lightly to her heart. On stage, Jimmy leaned forward, elbows on the desk, head low. His words came out quieter this time. I didn't mean for it to go like this, I know, Keanu replied. But it did. The moment stretched raw and unpolished. Without saying another word, Jimmy shoved the water-soaked cue cards to the side. His hand trembled as the pages stuck together in a mess of soggy ink and silence. Just like that, the set no longer felt like a studio. It felt like a mirror. No one moved. The set lights kept glowing, the cameras kept rolling, but something fundamental had shifted in the room. Jimmy sat still, eyes down, surrounded by the mess of water and paper. Yet he was no longer the center of the scene. Keanu rose from his chair. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't slam anything or storm off. He stood the same way he had entered, quietly with purpose. The weight of the moment traveled with him as he turned toward the audience, and every eye followed. A security guard near the side of the stage stepped forward, unsure. Maggie reached out from the wings and gently placed a hand on the man's arm. Let him go, she said. But on his terms. Keanu paused near the edge of the stage, looking at the crowd, not scanning, not smiling for applause, just seeing them. All of them. Thank you for listening, he said. Not to me, but to what matters. For half a second, the room remained silent, and then the audience rose to their feet in waves. Hands came together in a slow, rising ovation that didn't sound like celebration. It sounded like acknowledgement. Jimmy stayed seated, not looking up. Keanu didn't wait for a cue or music. He walked off the stage the same way he had lived most of his life, unannounced, unhurried, and unshaken. The clip exploded online within hours. Keanu walks off Kimmel. After tense exchange, audience turns on Jimmy. After painful misfire, Reeves delivers quiet masterclass in grace under pressure. News anchors discussed it. Comment sections filled with words like respect, dignity, and finally someone said it. The moment wasn't about drama anymore. It had become something else entirely. Something real. Outside the studio, under the soft glow of streetlights, Maggie handed Keanu his phone. "You should see this," she said. He looked down at the screen, still lit. A video of his quiet stand had already passed 1 million views, and it was climbing faster with each blink. He stared at it for a moment, then let out a small breath through his nose, not quite a laugh, but something close. "Maybe," he said, "they're finally listening." He slipped the phone into his pocket. The night air moved gently around them, quiet, open. Then he walked away from the building into the dark, into the world, into whatever would come next, and for once the world didn't look away.